second part is about the impacts of COVID-19 in HTA or in pharmacoeconomics. Of course, I have prepared this looking forward, not so much focusing on the things that have just happened or are happening today, but I will focus more on the things that will likely happen on the near future and on the medium term and on the opportunities that we have there. And I think there are a number of opportunities because those, like all of us here in this meeting and myself, who believe in the power of pharmacoeconomics to enforce and to support proper decision making in healthcare, there are many opportunities, and some of them have been revealed by COVID-19.
Prof, we can't see your cam. From your cam, we can't see you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But you can see my presentation, right?
Yes, as well. Thank you.
Very well. So getting back to our index, we have discussed how did the COVID-19 impact the side of people, how did it impact or will impact in the future or should impact in the future in becoming more flexible the side of organization of care. Now we will talk about the role of regulators and payers, of course, those using pharmacoeconomics, HTA in particular as a regular tool, and then a couple of slides, one for innovation and another one for the power of data, another interesting feature and outcome of the COVID-19 pandemic. Firstly, HTA payers, in the short term, we will have some potential delays, at least where I come from. We will have delays in drugs that were close to launch. This is bad news for pharma companies, also bad news for patients, for pharmacists, for physicians who work in to negotiate and have those technologies available. And why will we have delays? Mostly because we now have a work backlog. We have delayed work because our priorities during the past 2 months have been around HTA regulatory issues, while also working from home and adapting from that around COVID-19. So it's a fact, it's true that most meetings were cancelled or postponed. Some reports were not prepared in time, they certainly were not analyzed in time. So for the most countries, we will have delays in the launch of products. And even the product being launched, we will have delays in regard to the calendar in terms of the traction of the product. The products will penetrate the market at a slower pace than they should have, or at least at a slower pace that we intended them to have. Another important topic has to do with financial stress. Again, the issue of budgets. How will we see that happening in our individual hospital and practices? Hopefully, we'll still get our salary, but other than that, we will see some delays in payments. We will see the payers asking pharma companies, device companies, well, all our suppliers in general, we will be asking them for extra discounts. We will prefer discounts, or at least HTA authorities will in the future prefer discounts to other access models. So we will have overall an extra pressure on prices. And of course, when someone points that out, well, we have the COVID-19 to blame. So I do expect some extra pressure on prices and the blame going to the virus. So for how long will these things go like that? At least for 3 months more, maybe a year more. You know, this is the sort of phenomenon that causes ripples, and we will see the ripples going on for quite some time now. Not all is bad news, at least for those companies and those working on technologies that are relevant to COVID-19. That can be the case of the vaccines, that can be the case of drugs aiming at COVID-19, and also all sorts of devices. For those, we have fast tracks, maybe informally, maybe not acknowledged as fast tracks, but the fact is that while the other things have stood quiet for the past 2 months, everything that was important for COVID-19 speeded up and entered the market as soon as possible. We saw that, and we'll probably keep watching that happen for the next month. The priority will be given in terms of analysis, in terms of meetings, in terms of attention to COVID-19 related therapies. This means that probably these technologies, however, we have heard already of some prices for treatments and some prices for vaccines, and well, they are not that high, so it will not be a problem for most healthcare budgets to support those treatments. At least the prices that have been going on, they are not that scary. We'll probably be able to cope with that, even for 10, 20, 50 million, 30 something, I believe Saudi Arabia is about 33, 34 million inhabitants. It will be possible to cope with that for the prices that have been speaking in the markets. Still, the attention, all the attention is going for those products. So, other than delays and less money available for things, what do we have in HTA? We have good news. I think even though we had to speed up things and to postpone some projects, HTA will still be seen as the proper tool to support decision-making in the introduction, in the reimbursement of novel drugs. I do believe that HTA bodies will see this sort of methodologies as an investment that governments, payers will continue to support. We may not see a great evolution in terms of methods, because if the topics today are less money, or at least the risk of overspending, we will have an extra emphasis on budget impact models, the ISA ratio discussion. We will not look as we should be looking. Dr. Hannah's presentation a while ago emphasized the sources of value and impact of technologies. They go to productivity, and that investigation led by Dr. Jazia, it's much more, it's about productivity. It's so much more than the direct costs and direct treatments. However, for the short term, I don't think at least European authorities will focus a lot on that. They will probably focus on the budget impact and the more traditional techniques. And this can go on for another 6 months, a year, something like that. For the medium term, however, things will start to evolve. And in the medium term, I think we will see some discussion around the topic of value for money. And the good news here is that the perception of value, the things that matter, the things that are important in treatments, and that could be quality of life, that could be productivity, being able to get back to work, to our families, that will not change. That has not changed in the people's awareness, in the people's conscience. So it's a matter of solving the short-term urgency. We will get back in the medium term to the discussion of value for money. Of course, people will pay a lot of attention to whether there's really value or not. There's differential value or not in comparison to the other technology. The discussion will come back, and we'll get back to our normal in HTA. Certainly after authorities, hospital, having made the proper provisions regarding vaccines and acute treatments. Beyond the losses that we had, we will, or because of the losses that we had, we will probably be asking our suppliers in new drugs for, and this is not good news for the pharma industry, we'll be asking for budget neutrality. We will be asking for some extra savings, or we will be much more critic in terms of the results. I mean, the effectiveness, the therapeutic value added, the side effects. We were critic about that, but we will be more in order to get a better deal. That's probably the trend for the next few months, a year at least. So the other attributes, productivity, quality of life, they will be seen as nice to have, but not so much value, at least in the 2020 discussions. Of course, we will have more teleconferences, so that's the way probably authorities will catch up the lost time. It's improving the service, speeding up the service. We will have more teleconferences. We will have probably a much bigger emphasis on collecting data. National authorities will tend to trust more on their own, properly collected with sound methodologies data than on international data. You know, you have been doing research, all of you, and you know how easy it is to find a piece of research that serves better our needs than another one. It's so easy to find international data that serves best our needs. But with actual data, with our patients, we will be closer to the truth and closer to the public that we want to serve. So I do devise an emphasis overall on collecting national data and local data for supporting the claims. I also think that there will be a special eye on technologies. Technologies means drugs, but can also be devices or companion devices that help to solve bottlenecks, help to increase the efficiency, the compliance of patients. We can have a better eye for those products that help patients to comply with treatments and things like that. And also more effective treatments, treatments that ask for the patients to come less times to the hospital, things like that. This will be important features of treatment in the near future. Of course, we will keep talking about budgets, and my opinion is that we won't always be able to trace a root cause to COVID-19 to the budget discussion, but it will still be a nice excuse to impose further budget gaps, further limitations. COVID-19 will serve as an excuse for a lot of things. If it is an excuse to improve our care, welcome. If not, let's move on beyond that. One important technique, one important tool that pharma companies, universities, researchers, and providers could use in the future is the horizon scanning one. It's difficult to find suitable data or specific data for individual markets, but I do believe that we can take a lot of profit and gain the sympathy of payers, gain the sympathy of rulers, governors, etc., when we provide horizon scanning, when we help them to foresee the future. This involves what? Going to epidemiology and forecasting the natural course of diseases, going with the pharma industry to the portfolios and see what's coming into the treatment areas, into the treatment lines for the next years. And then we can forecast what the budget of lung cancer will be in the near future, what the budget for ischemic heart disease will be for the near future, and we can better help to prepare budgets and dedicated funding, if it's the case in some countries at least. Finally, will there be room for risk-sharing agreements for value-based healthcare frameworks, things like that? Yes, if the conditions are created. Yes, and if they add efficiency. Yes, and if we have the proper means to collect data. Yes, and if we have the means to have a risk-sharing agreement, comply with it, and get the rewards for the hospital and for the patients. So if we have the infrastructure in place, we can implement and probably welcome risk-sharing agreements or value-based, patient-centric delivery models. If we don't have yet the infrastructure in place, at least in those hospitals, these sort of projects may have some delay in catching up, okay? Because we will take what's the most safe bets. And in order to take the most safe bets, we need to have the infrastructure ready and to be prepared for and to trust that the results will be delivered in the end. I personally believe a lot in this sort of managed entry agreements or patient support programs, things like that. But quite frankly, the hospital, the physicians, the nurses, my colleagues, managers, they need to be prepared for this so that they can trust. Otherwise, they have other bets to make, because time is also a very scarce resource for everyone. Now, one word for innovation, because HTA and pharmacoeconomics are a lever for innovation. With proper assessment, we do get a better grasp about what the opportunities are, and we can help our partners in the pharma industry, in the device industry, to make the right bets and to approach us with technologies that are really important for our markets and maybe the ones that are not so important, not so relevant for our, at least in our priorities. Now, R&D, how will this be effective? We will look at future publications, and I think that in a few months, in a year time, we will see by the publications pace and content which areas have slowed down. That's certainly a way to understand what was mostly affected by COVID-19. Certainly publications regarding the infection, they have increased, but other areas may have slowed down the scientific production that can have consequences in the future. Now, R&D activities, they were halted or they were significantly delayed because of the constraints of the pandemic. We certainly did not have the staff inside the hospital working from home. They did not work the same way. Pharma industry and the promoters of the clinical trials, they could not visit the hospitals. So we had some delays. R&D will suffer in the future. It's not just about the bureaucratic processes in the regulators and in HTA that products will come later to the market. It's also because there's a phase 2, phase 3, lesser phases, phase 1 products, they have been significantly delayed. I think hospitals should join pharma industry and CROs to very quickly put in place plans to catch up with the lost time. We cannot lose time to science. Other businesses, other than the healthcare industry, other businesses, chemical industry, airplane industry, software industry, they have increased their R&D levels during the crisis because they know that after the crisis, there will be a market surge. So there will be an opportunity to put new products in the market, probably only for 2021. So it's the time now to invest and to prepare the new products. And you know, products in healthcare, they take a lot of time. They don't take months, they take years and huge levels of uncertainty to arrive to the market. So it's about time to implement some plans to catch up our activity as quickly and as smooth as possible so that we as hospitals and as providers, as individual researchers, we do not step behind the other countries, we do not step behind the other geographies in terms of preference for R&D. And this is a special message also for my friends from Saudi Arabia. I really believe that you have strong abilities in R&D and we need to capture them for your geography as well before they move to other geographies. Now, the centers, individually the centers, they may swing between hospitals, between two sides. One, they will try to catch up and return to the previous state of affairs, which means let's see the trials that were incoming and let's implement them as soon as possible. Or we can have some centers trying to come up with riskier plans, I would say more audacious plans, and to select clinical trials more on phase 3, more close to the market, so that they can present results in a swifter and quicker way. We may have the two behaviors. Centers saying that, okay, we want to recover our abilities, but we want to recover just by taking any clinical trial that shows up at the door. We will prefer the ones that are closer to the market. So we may have more competition for those phase 3 and closer to the market trials in the near future. Data. Data was acknowledged, and all of us certainly went through some websites from international, I don't know, NGOs, universities, research, think tanks, whatever, the World Health Organization, of course. We went all through those websites looking for data on COVID-19, and we have those nice curves comparing countries and looking at our own country for sure, and trying to devise whether we were at the peak or not. So what did the crisis bring in terms of data? I think it brought an extra sense of the value of data. The whole crisis reinforced our need for timely data. We need timely data. We don't need data from 2 years ago. We need data from yesterday, if possible from today, so that we could act on top of the emergency. But why not have that data for our normal, regular patients in the future? If we could get that for COVID-19, can't we get that as well for cardiac infraction? Can't we get that as well for road accidents? We certainly can. It's just a matter of connecting the systems and having the data ready to be used and to be employed. Of course, we want transparent data. We want a professional use of data. We want to have also a multidisciplinary view on data, because a physician, a pharmacist, a nurse, a manager, a statistician, we will all interpret data in a different way, in a complementary way. All data-related disciplines were acknowledged during this pandemic and will continue to be important in the future, and this is the good news. Which are they? Of course, GHAA, also real-world evidence in observational research studies, value-based healthcare, data science in general. This means going through health data and combining it with social data, social networks data, other sources of data. All those disciplines became important and useful during the pandemic, so we can make the translation and say they will become also important. They will still be useful to support decision-making in other disease areas. I do believe that in the future, it has been like that for a while now. Of course, it's not just a matter of perceptions, but things in the future will rely increasingly more on data. So data will be important as a basis of differentiation. This is another message, certainly for those who work in hospitals, to have informed discussions with pharma industry, but it's also a message for the pharma industry. Rely on data to build the differentiation. That's the only thing you can do, pharma industry. That's the only thing you can oppose to a discussion that's gonna fall on budgets. If you want to talk about something else than budgets, talk about your data. But for that, you need to provide us the data, you need to bring in good quality data, and you need to build good insights on top of that data. Did you find something on the data? That's a good insight, that's a good idea on patients, that's a connection between dots that no one else saw. Bring us that, we may value that and incorporate that on the price in terms of value for the product. Otherwise, we'll discuss the thing you don't like to discuss, which is budget impacts. So stakeholders in general will prefer data so that they can support sustainable courses of action for the future. We know that data may also sustain interesting partnerships with universities, with pharma industry, with promoters of clinical trials, and interesting partnerships between payers, governments, NGOs. I really think that our relationship in the future will be based on trust, will be based on us knowing each other, of course, but will be based on data, which is very important so that we can move on beyond perceptions, which clearly were not useful to anyone. And finally, we know that the public has learned a lot on COVID-19. They did not know a year ago what chains of infections were. They did not know what COVID was, what sort of virus was that. Probably most of them didn't know what was the difference between a virus and a bacteria. Many people learned during the process. So health literacy was important. We can use this awareness of people in regard to health issues to promote in the future, but we must do it quickly. Do you want to educate people to prevent heart disease? Do you want to educate people to prevent depression? We can act now. People are aware for the topics of healthcare and well-being and preventing preventing disease while they are healthy. So we can use this awareness right now. If we let things go, they will be talking about holidays and other things in the near future and forget about health. We can use now to make proper education of the audiences. Finally, just to conclude, in the short run, we will have some diminishing of opportunities in the markets, and everyone works in markets. Hospital providers have their market. It's the patients and their families. Pharma industry has their markets. The markets are the public that goes into hospitals and gets prescribed the product. So in the short run, yes, we'll have a shortage in the markets, but the disease will not go away. The diseases are still there. Cancer is still there. Skin diseases are still there. No one spoke about those diseases during these 2 or 3 months. So the market opportunity will be even broader for next year. And we need to be prepared. We need to be very flexible so that we can take in a whole lot of patients, which will be next year patients and those that were delayed from today. So some hospitals, I think, they will take the opportunity to revise the way they work. They will become more patient-centric. Stakeholders, meaning payers and suppliers, will certainly support the efforts of some hospitals to become more patient-centric. In this regard, COVID was not a missed opportunity for patients in cancer or in other disease areas, but they need to make an effort, of course. Otherwise, the tendency will probably be to return to the old state of affairs as soon as COVID-19 fades away. And we do not want to come back to the old state of affairs. Why? Because clearly it was not prepared for a surge in activity. And remember, 6 months ago, we were saying that we need to evolve. We were saying that we cannot get more results from this system. We were saying that we need to attend further needs in the coming decades, and hospitals organized the way they are, they cannot produce that amount of care. So we need to reorganize. And COVID-19 taught us some ways to reorganize. Has to do with the flexibility, having 20% of the patients being attended at home, things like that. Okay. R&D was affected, of course, and we will try to overcome the delays, and that was a prominent outcome of COVID-19. Another prominent outcome, but a good one, was the acknowledgement of the role of data and the wide acceptance of digital tools. So I don't think, even though some physicians, for example, were hesitant to have the medical appointments, we have acknowledged that they are useful in some occasions. Some other occasions, the patient needs to come to the hospital or to a secondary facility. These are all opportunities to pursue in the future. Finally, and to end up with, it's about the power of data. One thing is to talk about convictions. One thing is to talk about narratives, stories we can tell one another. The other thing is about facts. And facts is the most important thing. Facts are the things that really affect our lives. And we can talk about the facts from the moment that we measure things. We did learn to measure COVID-19 very quickly. So let's start integrating the systems and start talking about diabetes. Start talking about what's happening today with patients. We don't have to know the glycemia levels of the patients every time of the day. I mean, you can have a machine to measure that within, but we need to follow up properly the patients, not to lose them, and keep track on their responsiveness to the treatment. And we can do that with appropriate technology, data, and procedures. And now it's a challenge for each one of us to implement it in his, her therapeutical area. Thank you very much for your attention during this presentation. I will be available for questions.